Hi, this is Zixi, and I'm presenting this paper, The FAIR Guiding Principles for Scientific Data Management and Stewardship, written by Mark and others, published in 2016. This comment is the first formal publication of the FAIR principles, and it includes the rationale behind the principles and also some implementation examples. Let me quickly go through the agenda. We will sum up the paper, talk about what is FAIR guidelines, and my additional research on how to go FAIR. Then we will discuss some pros and cons and relate the paper to our lecture content. Before we dive into the paper, let's first look at an example mentioned in the paper that demonstrates some current barrier in academic research. Imagine you are a gene researcher and you just finished a complicated experiment with some gene and you generated a dataset of RNA in, let's say, X organism under Y condition of tissue Z, and you want to compare your data with other researchers' result, but finding other data could be really time consuming. You have to filter dataset that are generated under X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah conditions, figure out if the data is open to public, what tools are used, is the data reusable, and what are the formats. In a nutshell, it will be really time consuming and costly to figure out all of these on your own, and we would definitely prefer machines to do this for us. But a lot of digital scientific data are not annotated well enough, or they are not machine readable enough. Therefore, to easier reuse and discover data, scientists need a general guideline to follow. Then, there we have FAIR guideline is designed to improve the infrastructure supporting the reuse of scholarly data. So what is FAIR principles? It is a set of general principles that act as a guideline to enhance reusability of scholarly data. And it was designed by academia, industry funding agencies, scholarly publishers to benefit the whole community. The purpose is to facilitate good data management and stewardship, to improve findability, accessibility, interoperability, reusability of the digital assets, and help overcome barriers to data discovery and reuse. So given that there are actually so many other peer initiatives that encourage good data management, FAIR differs in that it describes concise, domain-independent, high-level principles that can be applied to a wide range of scholarly outputs, and it puts specific emphasis on enhancing the ability of machines to automatically find and use its data. In addition, it applies to not only conventional data, but also to algorithms, tools, and flows, everything else that generate that data. And the paper also includes some examples on the implementation. And FAIR principle is trying to solve the current issues such as many data repositories are diverse and less integrated. So it actually make data reusability problems worse. And we as humans rely a lot on computational agents to discover and integrate data. So we need to assist machines on appropriately acting when they are faced with various types of data. So you might wonder, what does FAIR principle stands for? F for findability. Data set should be described, identified, and registered or indexed in a clear and unequivocal manner. A for accessibility. Datasets should be accessible through a clearly defined access procedure, ideally using automated means. Metadata should always remain accessible. I for interoperable. Data and metadata are conceptualized, expressed, and structured using common published standards. R for reusability. Characteristics of data and their provenance are described in details according to domain-relevant community standards, with clear and accessible conditions for use. Some key points mentioned in the principle are First, metadata and metadata standards should be articulated and made publicly available to the greatest extent possible. And second, data indexation, retrieval, and analysis are assisted and executed by computers, which means that facilitating automation is a very crucial prerequisite for large-scale data-intensive research. Third, controlled data access. Instead of arguing for open and free availability per se, the aim is to settle on legitimate and effective means of controlling access. I did a little bit of research of FAIR guidelines implementation, and I found an organization called GoFAIR. It provided a framework in 2018 to help with implementation of FAIR guidelines. So the framework basically starts off with metadata for machines workshop. During the workshops, a community of practice would go ahead and consider its metadata requirements. And then during FAIR, and then a reusable metadata schema produced in that F4M process will compose a larger FIP, which is the FAIR implementation profile. And lastly, in return, the FIP guides the choice and configuration of FAIR infrastructure. So let's talk about some pros and cons of the FAIR guidelines. First of all, let's talk about some pros and cons of the FAIR guidelines. The FAIR guiding principles are high level, so it can be applied to a wide range of scholarly output. And second, it has an emphasis on machine-driven activities, which kind of distinguish itself from other peer initiatives. But at the same time, it might lack implementation specifications since it's high level. Because the FAIR guiding principles on its own are very unlikely to lead to a responsible form of data sharing. Although it might provide a huge step forward for data stewardship, but it's not like a complete set of guiding principles for exactly how to do this and how to do that. So in order for this data sharing to really take effect and the whole infrastructure to improve, the research communities as well as individual researchers need to rise to the challenge. And to relate this topic to our lecture content, first of all, this is stewardship guideline for scientific data. We talk about many scientific tools during lecture, such as SciSpark and other tools. Scientific data are cubes, and information could be extracted by slicing these cubes. We can see that scientific data could be hard to explore and reuse without such principle like FAIR guidelines. For example, Sci-Tensor RDDs are following some FAIR guidelines since the Sci-Tensor RDD can keep metadata in the hash map, and other researchers and scientists could query it and know how the data is created. And at the same time, this reminds me of how we talked about metadata during class, how important metadata is, because metadata could use to be detect file type, and I believe this paper stressed that machine need metadata to know what actions should be done. And since machines are really essential in current data-rich research environments, data creators need to label the data correctly to make it machine readable and make the whole data sharing thing work. Okay, then that's all. Thank you for listening, and please let me know if you have any questions or suggestions.